All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can. Loud and clear, Xavier. Thank you.
All right,
Yep.
perfect.
All right. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to my game design live stream. I'm joined by my co hosts. Sorry, my name is Quinn Cusledge, and I am joined by my co hosts, Joseph Jansen and Xavier Rodriguez. We are students at Ringling College of Art Design in the VR major. And I am happy to announce that today we are joined by two VR professionals, Ana Carolina Pereira and David Dannelly, who are both professors of ours at Ringling. We're really glad to have you guys on the show. And I'd like to just kind of have you guys introduce yourself, tell us what you do or have done, and whichever one wants to go first is fine by me. Can you guys hear us?
Yeah. David,
Okay,
you want to
perfect.
go?
I get here. Okay. I know. I was gonna say. So basically, kind of like my background is all over the place. Started out working on games that were basically published at a company called Virtual Proxy Entertainment. Worked on games that were published by Namco, Big Fish Games. We also kind of briefly did some other stuff. I left, got a graduate degree, and just really from there have worked in a few different industries. over the years, but mostly I have like kind of stuck to being a sort of game professor as my base thing, and contract work kind of comes afterwards. And I've been mostly an indie game developer ever since. Yeah, that's about it, Anna.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Ana Carolina. I am a VR developer. I have just about 20 shipped titles now in serious games and applications for clients such as children's hospitals, the Air Force, enterprise like MasterCard or Solvay Chemicals, just about a little bit of everything when it comes to serious games and applications. I've worked for maybe 5 years, technical artist. One of my focuses is, improving pipelines and optimization. Um, More recently, I have been working at the Ringling College of Art and Design as a teacher. I have been teaching a little bit of everything, game design and VR related. And to top it off, I do character arts on my free time and as for freelance. And I also stream a lot.
And
It's
we're
nice to meet
very
you.
happy to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So, a little bit about the game we're playing today. So, Portal 2 came out in 2010. So, I was a fresh-faced 10-year-old boy when I got this game on my PS3. And I remember playing all the way through it in about 2 days because when I was 10, I didn't really have any other responsibilities. So, beating Portal 2 was the most important thing in my life at that time. And I remember out of all the games that I played back then, that was the one I kind of went back to the most. And I think the reason that Portal 2 resonates with so many people, myself included, is all of the game design elements that come together to make the game so replayable. But it's also the story of Portal 2, which has a lot of really great characters. And that's funny because none of them are human. None of the speaking characters are human. But we're able to get a lot of personality due to the writing out of these robots, essentially. And I think that Portal 2 makes a lot of people laugh. It makes a lot of people think. And, because of that, it's remained one of the best games of the 2010s, in my opinion. So, just a little bit more of a background. I've played this game. I know that Xavier has played Portal 1 and a little bit of Portal 2. Anna, how much Portal have you played again?
I never finished Portal 2.
And David?
I've played pretty much every Valve game up to this game, so I never played the multiplayer, but I know pretty much everything about this.
I actually have yet to
Pretty
meet
cool.
someone who's beat the multiplayer. I tried to play it with my girlfriend at one point, and she stopped playing it with me because it got a little too frustrating. So I think it takes a certain I think it takes a certain duo to really beat that game on co-op.
It was their attempt. I feel like there was a lot of things that went on behind the scenes, especially with like the potato sack sale and stuff like that. But the cooperative was like an attempt to try and insert basically microtransactions. And the type of audience that's interested in this game is interested in it for the story. And ironically, yeah, I'm not interested in playing it with another person. I think most people weren't either. And now it's just really hard to do unless you can find somebody online that wants to team up with you.
Yeah, that's been my trouble as of late. But Xavier, why don't you go ahead and throw us into level 3 of the campaign, because that's kind of when the testing truly starts. And of course, we're going to talk about kind of what's awesome about Portal and why we're even talking about it. Almost. See, what's the year? Almost 11 years after it came out. I think Portal 2 was 2011 on that release. So, obviously, it's exciting to look at a game that's older, that's older, and especially something that I played before I even knew that I wanted to do VR development or game design. But Portal 2 is really good. So, Joe, have you gotten a chance to play a little bit of Portal 2 before the show tonight?
Unfortunately, I was unable to, but I recall I played it in the past when I was much younger, like with a friend. We tried the co-op mode and we were unsuccessful, unfortunately, in beating it. But that was the most experience I had.
When it comes to, I guess, our professional level designers in attendance of our guests today, what's the first thing you kind of see when you walk into this level, and would you say that it's a successful piece when it comes to level design in general? That's up for either David or Anna, by the way.
Well, just that strikes me immediately, because like I remember the overall story, but not necessarily some of these levels. But I mean, the big thing is just this whole you're expecting when you jump on one of those platforms to jump forward, and instead you just fly forward, like sort of undermining expectations because the game is established that this thing should be working. But under Wheatley, everything is basically falling apart very, very quickly and very rapidly.
I actually believe that this part in the game, this level is controlled by GLaDOS, because Wheatley hasn't taken over quite yet. Because in the story, right?
Oh
I think,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
because
that's right.
remember in the story right after Wheatley takes over, he immediately turns on Chell, who's the mute player character in this game.
This is the part where essentially where GLaDOS just woke up after being asleep, dead for 99999 years, and the whole facility is completely fallen apart.
Xavier,
Yeah.
I'm gonna help you out here. Look at you have to shoot an orange portal too before you can go through the blue portal.
Oh, don't worry. I know I have to shoot it. I just have no idea where.
Do you see another white thing on the ceiling there?
Yeah.
No. I mean,
Gotta walk
I
in
see
through
that.
A little bit forward.
Is it,
there you go.
There you go.
This little gap. I'm supposed to see this little gap.
Come on.
Oh, come on.
Call yourself a lever designer, Xavier?
Yeah,
Well,
and that was hard to see.
You made it.
One of the things that's actually kind of like, I will say this about it, is I remember actually really liking the level design a little bit less in this game, mostly because, it's like a destroyed facility. It's not really I feel like it went more for sort of cinematic experiences, and the level design got less tight as a result. So it just became much more confusing to a certain extent, especially later on in the game when you're inside the cave and you're trying to figure out where's the white surface to like shoot a portal at.
Oh god, yes, those sections are difficult. I remember that when I was playing through it this week, and I thought to myself, God, this could have been better. whenever I think about those sections, and some people, when they play this game, they install cheats to skip that section entirely, which is.
No, I did. I no clipped through it.
Do you think the difficulty is just bad level design, or is it on purpose?
You know what? I think that when it comes down to it, though, as a level designer, you're supposed to be able to find that balance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Especially with a puzzle game, you should be looking at what you're creating and going, is this too hard, or like it's actually that, you know what? I want to refer to you guys actually, and if you could answer your own question, I'm thinking about it and I'm going, well, if we're doing a puzzle experience, how hard can it be, and at what point does it become the player is struggling because they're not trying, or because we've designed the level too hard?
So as game developers, we are very it's very difficult to judge the difficulty of the levels you created because you know all the secrets, right? I was actually reading this today because I'm helping some students making a puzzle game. And one of the first rules of making puzzle games is your game will be too hard, get people to test for you who have no inclusion in the game development whatsoever.
So that's where, from your level design presentation we saw last year, when you said play test, that's why you said that.
Absolutely. And user testing. User testing, super important, because like I always say, we should not make assumptions about how the player is going, what they're going to do. Right?
Would you actually be willing to go into kind of a little bit more detail onto why we don't make assumptions as developers?
Well, yes. Well, first off, especially in VR, VR developers tend to have more experience with the game they're creating, first of all. So if I create a brand new world that I understand all the rules, I know all the affordances, all of the patterns myself, how can I possibly be a neutral tester for my world if I know everything, right? If you throw my mom in there, though, we might have a problem, right? She doesn't know all the rules that I came up with in my brain when I was creating this game. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, of course.
Then the importance of playtesting. It's just super important, right? Well, I forgot the rest of the question. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things. It's you show your work, you show your paintings to people, so that because your brain is in a completely different spot and you need other people to like look at it, so you could speed up this whole testing process. You could do it without other people, but it's so much more time consuming and difficult. It wastes a huge amount of time, and you may never come to the answer. So the iteration is it's a necessity. There's no way otherwise because yeah, it's exactly that. You know how the game plays. So once you know it, you can speed run it. It's not really a challenge anymore. But of course, people who are just, your audience, you want them to play test it completely blind or play test it sequentially if you're trying to test to see if it's possible to like soft lock the game.
Yeah,
So
that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing for VR, I'd say. In the past few years, it's been a lot of having other people play it because they find ways to soft lock the level that you would never have thought of, and you go, "Why did you do that to me?" Sometimes,
yeah,
sometimes like
your progression stop the game very, very easily if you don't
yeah,
make it
and
airtight.
All it takes is to throw like an item that's important, like under the wrong item, and there you go, it's gone forever.
yeah,
And you
that
can't
actually
use it
is
anymore.
a perfect segue into a question we have. And this is from Deanna Boyer, who said, "Do you think there could have been more props/assets to help point the viewer in the right direction from a level design standpoint? Like, do you think that the developers could have done a little bit more to construct these levels with more kind of, I would say, affordances, as I'm going to translate this question,
Yeah.
to help communicate where the user needs to go in a more effective way?"
I think so. Like one of the big reasons why it's really hard to navigate around the game, I feel like, is that before it was like a playtest facility. It was something where everything was kind of laid out in front of you. You could just it's a lot more straightforward. But one of the biggest issues that I found with this was that they tried to give this complete and total adherence to sort of like realism, and it edges a little bit too much towards that area. I mean, like, yeah, the decayed facility and everything, like all of this
Xavier.
ends up making it more confusing.
Yeah, so
I know.
Xavier, shoot up a little bit higher on the wall with your blue portal. No, turn around.
Stealing?
See where your blue Xavier, look where your blue portal is on the wall behind you.
behind me. Oh.
Do you know where your blue
Yeah.
portal is? Locate your portal. Yeah, there
Okay.
you go.
Yeah, this is what David means when he says that they could do a better job at level design. Like, I've played a lot of video games before, and this is stumping me. So
Yeah.
imagine someone that
Well-
has never played a game before trying this.
It's
I honestly,
it's the photorealistic lighting that's like getting in the way. It's the fact that you have to use white surfaces, but they're all dirty. The levels are way bigger to give it more of an expansive feel. It was way more compressed in Portal 1. So there's just a lot more things that could go wrong that there's nothing you can really do about it because you're trying to do a destroyed facility, or in the case of the the caves, just
which leads us to another great question though, is at what point do we sacrifice aesthetics for functionality?
Ooh,
Oh.
good one.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anna, you answer first because I have a simple answer to that.
Oh my god. I think that you don't need to sacrifice aesthetics. You can adapt your aesthetics, if that makes sense. So it can still just be as high quality as before, but adapted to be intuitive or straight up just good level design. A good example would be God of War, the most recent one. They pour aesthetics into that game, and everything in there is made to guide the player in some way by leading lines, subconscious ways to just guide the eye through the level.
So that game is a personal favorite of yours, right, Anna?
I've played it, but I've never finished it. So
that's one I played after your lecture on VR level design, in which you used the blockouts of that level in order to kind of show us how we could use composition in our level design.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
remember
it's a good one. Maybe you could do a podcast in the future on it.
I would, yeah. So in the future, eventually, I'm going to purchase an Elgato so I can stream gameplay from consoles. Otherwise, I'd have to emulate it, and I would rather buy the game and support devs.
Mhm.
But let's see, I think there's more to that. But sorry about that.
That is
Oh, I
good.
was
So,
just
Yeah,
gonna like mention kind of briefly. This was just something that just popped in my head looking at this. I don't think these puzzles are very hard. I really do think this just comes down to the lighting and everything else.
Yeah, I would say the level design is impairing the user's ability to navigate the level, and that user is
Well,
Xavier.
the aesthetics of it. Like, it depends on when you do it, but it's just the aesthetics of what's going on is kind of interfering with it. Because if it was just, I don't know, if you did it as a gray box, it's probably played just fine.
I would
Like an alpha gray box, but
Yeah, I would agree with David on that one because once I like figure out what the puzzle is trying to get me to do, like it seems to be very easy to solve it, but until I can find like that first portal that I need to shoot to get things started, that's where I have like the most trouble.
I
So
think
speaking of, go ahead, Quinn.
no, go ahead. I can say mine right after yours.
Speaking of finding that first portal to throw, what do you think about the difficulty curve of this game? Do you feel like it prepares you well for this challenge that you're having now? Or do you think you just got thrown in the deep end?
It's a bit hard to say because I indirectly threw myself off the deep end by going into chapter 3 before playing chapters 2 and 1.
Oh, that
But
explains it.
but I'd like to give the game some credit and say they probably did give users a good introduction to the mechanics that I indirectly chose to skip.
I will say as someone who has played the game quite a bit that the difficulty of the levels follows kind of like a 3-part system. Oh, you found a Ratman hideout. Good job, Xavier.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
We'll get into that later, but I would say that they mostly follow the same difficulty, and then they ramp up in parts essentially. So you have part 1, which has this about this difficulty for pretty much all the tests, and then part 2, which is the original Portal facility from the 1950s, and it just introduces more mechanics that you have to contend with. And then the third part, where Wheatley's running the lab, and he doesn't know how to design tests, so they're horrible. I would say that the third section of the game falls flat for me. But off of that, Xavier, one good formula that I use when I play this game is I look for the destination and I go, okay, what do I need to do to get there? And if I can't get there right away, I look around the level and I go, all right, cool. So here's where I need to go. Here's what I need to have when I get there. And here's where the thing I need to have when I get there will be, and then I execute. So it's kind of like a something that you can't necessarily jump into. It is something that you have to plan, which is weird because it's a single player game, and a lot of times you employ that strategy when it comes to a multiplayer title, in my opinion. So, when it comes to Portal, it's a lot of that, the thought process that goes into it is going, okay, what do I need? Where do I get it? And how do I get it? And I think I personally enjoy that gameplay loop because it makes me feel smart when I finally finish the test, especially if I get it on my first try.
it's a bit weird. Oh, I was just gonna say it's a bit weird to say which game is better because I feel like it depends on if you grew up with it or not. Like which one, Portal 1 or Portal 2. But I think probably one of the things that kind of stands out to me about this is that really when the first game came out, that was at like a really weird time. I feel like in game development, because this was before we got microtransactions and we had like all of these extremely narrative heavy games. It felt like people were trying to explore this idea, and I heard there was a much more strong discussion about how to tell a story. And Portal 1 was kind of like Half-Life was, where it was like almost, I feel like a quantum, maybe not a quantum leap because not many games followed in its suit, but it was one of the only games I could point to and say like, this game, this series is like one of the only series that will never age.
Yeah,
like, it's one of those things. 20 years from now, this is still A, it looks good, and B, narratively, it's pretty fantastic.
I was actually going to ask you guys, do you think this game is one that will be studied by game developers and designers for years to come, or do you think eventually it'll fall into obscurity?
Oh no. Yeah, that's one thing about game designers that I think games that we study don't really go away. Like you'll see game designers studying chess, the age of a game doesn't make it better or worse, but yeah, I think it'll be studied.
Yeah, like a
And I
lot of
think,
oh,
okay,
yeah,
sorry,
go
David.
for it. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so I think to a degree, the aesthetics of this game is going to keep it more current longer. Firstly, they don't have organic assets as much. They don't have humans really that you see, except for you. So that really helps with the aging process. It just looks stylized and like cool. It'll never look bad. There are some games that will age very poorly because of their style choices.
I just realized, guys, Anna, a few people from your Discord, thank you for sharing that link with them, have some questions for us on Facebook. So I missed those. Apologies, everyone in the audience. But I think the first one kind of ties back into the discussion we were talking about when we were talking about level difficulty. And that is, does level difficulty also depend on your final vision of the game? Kind of like how Dark Souls is a game made to be difficult? Or do you think that it comes after the fact?
Depends on how good of a game dev you are.
So would you say that a good game designer has their final vision and difficulty of the game in mind before they're working on that final, or do you think there's a lot of cases where the user
they think they might, but they don't? Like nobody, there's no way to predict it. You figure it out through iteration. You figure it out, and plus, to another thing, keep in mind is just that it's entirely about like what is your audience, like what's your target, like what does your audience want, what are you intending to target towards whom? Because hard video games is games kept getting easier and easier, and then Dark Souls came around in 2009 and changed that, create an audience that wanted to play hard games. So, I mean, overall, yeah, it just depends on who you're targeting. If you want to go for lowest common denominator, that's where difficulty came from. Lowest common denominator. There's just certain audiences that you have to satisfy because our audiences aren't going to be satisfiable. You can't make a game too easy enough for just like a house mom or whoever to get there, but you also can't make that exact same game also hard enough to be challenging to somebody who's played Dark Souls for 10,000 hours.
Like
Mountain yeah. Or in my case, Mountain Blade for 3,000 hours. So.
No, I agree with David. But like the original question was more like, is it on accident sometimes? I think it would be wise to not let it happen by accident, especially because a big important part of game pacing is the difficulty curve over the length of your game, right? It's a very careful balance that you have to do to keep your audience engaged. Otherwise, the game feels very stale as you go along, boring.
Or it gets too hard at random jumps.
Mm-hmm. So you have to know that, and just a very chaotic method might unbalance your game.
Do you know, just to completely jump into a tangent, do you know of any games that take a chaotic system when it comes to level pacing that work? And that could be VR or normal.
I'm trying to think. Like the thing is, it's been a while. Like the problem is their games have probably would have aged poorly, but that's actually a really interesting question because there's movies that I could think of that are like that, and there's even movies that have like no breaks on the action, like Hardcore Henry. But when it comes to video games that are like that, I guess I don't know. Yeah, that's the first time I've ever been stumped by a question like years about like just is there any game that fits within this criteria? I don't think there really is one that's also like good.
Brandon in chat says Cluster Truck.
Cluster Truck. Yeah, that game. I feel like that doesn't like really like. That's not completely totally erratic. There's a rhythm to it. Like everything, you can still have something that feels erratic, but has like a rhythm of like hard, easy, easy, hard, easy, easy, or something like that. So
yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't had a chance to play Cluster Truck, but I've heard a lot about it. And that's definitely one that I wanted to look at.
It's fun. It's a really good game.
It's a good one. Yeah. Sometimes there's games that have a really large cult following, but they're not any good. So it's hard to play a game that I like, but then also acknowledge I shouldn't be studying this.
I'm like a hipster. I'm like one of the only people that likes Bound by Flame on the face of this planet. It's like
I've never even heard of Bound by Flame. Is that one that came out before I was born, David?
No, it was from like 6 years ago. They tried to make a BioWare game, but only had 9 months to do it. That's like there's so much potential in this idea, but it's like a terrible Witcher ripoff That's like
Oh.
super broken and super difficult.
Oh. Well, I would add, Quinn, to your comments about not wanting to learn from a certain game. Like, I think there's something to be learned from any game you like. There's a reason you like it. Why do you like it? What makes it likable to you?
Well,
Even
that's
bad
a-
games have cult followings, and that means maybe they're bad to you, but not to the people who like it, right?
Or like maybe a game that I really like, no one else likes, right? I think sometimes though, when it comes to bad games, the best thing to learn is what not to do
Oh yeah.
with certain titles. And with a lot of the VR games that you can get for free on Steam, there's a ton of content there where you can go, all right, so they were trying something here and it didn't exactly work, but there is still a really solid idea that we can go off of.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's fun about VR being such a young medium is that we have so many people who are super excited about VR. So they're trying a whole bunch of weird, crazy things that go against the very loose set of guidelines that we have in place for designing VR games. And a lot of the times they come up with something super awesome. And then we have a new VR game that's great.
Well done.
But then there's other, devs that play it safe, and we also get good titles from that. Like, I would say that when it comes to VR games that played it safe in terms of game design, we would have Half-Life Alyx, who they gave users a lot of options for customizing their experience, locomotion, and how they navigated. A lot of the experience was designed around making sure that you weren't moving the camera, that the user wasn't moving the camera when they didn't want to. So a lot of their cutscenes were designed around that. And we have a great experience and because it's Valve, there was a lot of new things. But then there's other experiences that do play it safe, and there's nothing new that comes from that. So I think a good example of a game that played it safe and is really good and playable that doesn't do anything necessarily new would be Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners. If you guys have played it,
Is that the VR one?
that's the VR zombie game.
Yeah,
So
I have
I would say that though that game plays it safe and it's really fun to play, there was nothing there that I hadn't seen in titles that came out earlier that year necessarily. Like there wasn't, because I had seen an inventory system that worked like that backpack that they had in the game. I had seen, physics-based weapons and certain combat elements that I had seen in other games. So that was one of those games that, it was a really good game, but it didn't feel like anything super novel was tried that could advance us forward.
Well,
And that's just my opinion.
It's been 8 years at this point since VR hardware has been available to devs. So there's like certain concepts that have been proven to at least like work. That's just kind of like my feeling about it. Is that if you're the more expensive a game is, and the more risks you take with unproven formulas, the more of a chance things could blow up in your face, or the more that it could be like Tribes 2, where they accidentally invented a sliding mechanic because the engine didn't work. So when you held down the spacebar, you would actually ski down mountains, and it became a central mechanic to the entire series that actually sold it to hardcore gamers.
Now, as people who have worked at, companies producing VR content, like I know Anna and David, you both have, when it comes to designing and creating a VR game, it is more expensive than a non-VR game or experience, correct?
Do you mean for the buyer
For production
or for
costs in general. Would you say that a company would spend more money creating a VR experience as compared to a non-VR title?
I personally don't have that data.
For me personally, like having mostly just worked on stuff that's like 2D and then just sort of going through the motions of teaching this and also trying to experiment with the hardware, it's that like my opinion about it is that it just depends on the scope of the game. Like there's things that are really expensive, like handcrafted animations. That's going to end up costing way more money. Or if you have to hire programmers for certain things, or you have to spec it for certain hardware. Like the big difficulty is usually like trying to pick an engine that's the easiest to get the game out the door on, rather than just necessarily is it VR, is it, if you try and make a real-time strategy game, whether it's VR or just a regular flat screen game, then it's both instances, it's going to be extremely expensive and time consuming because there's such a complicated mess of iteration testing, game design. You need people that can do multiplayer. Like they're both going to be equally expensive, and the VR component at that point, they're going to be the same. So it really just depends. it's only gonna depend really, like if you're trying to make something like Boneworks. Now you have to like keep track of skeletons and the movement and everything else. Like I feel like this is the one instance where it gets to be more expensive, more time consuming to just sit there and develop and try to get that whole system to work within the gameplay and have AI that will not look all janky and broken because you can grab them by their arms and fold them into a fold them into a box.
like you can in Boneworks.
Yeah, exactly. That's
'Cause-
where the problem comes from.
Though that's fun and new, it isn't exactly the most immersive. Now that we're about a half an hour into the podcast, I'm going to transition us from talking about Portal 2 and its game design elements, and we're going to start talking about the scenario where Valve hires anyone in this chat to be a VR developer and turning one of their classic Portal games into a full-fledged VR title of Half-Life Alyx quality. And what kind of things do you think we would run into as developers, and how would you as developers deal with some of those potential downsides or issues? Or do you think that it should even be in VR? Like, we're going to answer that why VR question. So before we even get into the potential game design, things we'd have to deal with and certain mechanics, let's talk about why would Portal or Portal 2 make a good VR title, or if it should even be one.
So the first thing I think of is that it would be absolutely amazing to play in VR. Imagine having the power holding the portal gun. But then I start to think about the technicality. And for those in the audience who are not the VR developers, there are a few very basic VR rules that innovation has not managed to solve. So one of those rules is that you should never jostle the player camera, which is the user's face. You have to be very careful with acceleration, moving them around the world. And I'm picturing like shooting portals and trying to jump through them, jumping down, jumping from one portal to the other. You can like do infinite portal.
Yeah,
where you
Xavier,
just
do us
continue going
a
through.
favor. And so right now, Xavier has a portal on the ground and he has a portal on the ceiling. So Xavier, since you have a portal on the ceiling, can you shoot your blue portal at a wall real quick?
Yeah, sure.
So right in that, see that wall? Go to a wall.
Next to it.
Yeah, just go to a wall and shoot
Oh.
your portal at a wall, please.
All
Like
right,
your
got
blue
it.
portal at a
Basically,
wall. So
put them
Like
both
this?
next to each other.
Like
so
this.
no,
one on the
Xavier.
floor, one on the wall.
So shoot one.
Hold on.
Shoot one on
Got
the
it.
wall.
All right.
Shoot your
yep.
blue
Yeah.
portal on the wall
No,
right
no,
now.
I think I got it.
Right. So look through that. Right. So we have one portal on the floor and we have one portal on the wall. Now, Xavier, go through the orange portal. No. Shoot the blue portal back on the floor, buddy. Shoot it back on the floor.
You want the blue portal on the floor?
Yeah, blue and orange.
I'm
Whoa.
trying to cover
Oh!
a topic of Xavier. Shoot it on the floor.
It's
Okay,
on- it's
so
on
we
the
have
floor.
we have infinite portal scenario. Let's start with that, and then we'll get to what I was trying to talk about.
Oh, jeez.
Forgive us.
Oh.
Here we have the infinite portal issue. Now, I feel like if we were to put a user in VR into this scenario where they're continuously dropping or they're flying through the portal, if you'll notice, the camera, is rotated directly upwards, which we can't physically rotate the player the way that they're being rotated when they go through the portal, and that's fine for a
Oh my
conventional
gosh, stop.
game like Portal, right? So definitely move away from this so you don't get our entire audience motion sick. But you see the general concept here. How would we make something like this work in VR? And could we even? Because the only conceivable way I see of doing it is if they're going through a portal at different offset angles and you have to flip the camera the way that they're flipping it, you would have to do a fade. So you would go into the portal, it would fade the camera, and then when you're fading back in, you're facing the right direction. And also, I'd like to open this up not only to our professionals, but Joe, who hasn't said anything yet.
Yeah, I mean, the main concern is obviously just, like what Ana said, discombobulating the player camera. And I think some form of a fade I would see working, not doing like an instantaneous teleportation where you just see them move from one space to another. I think if you do some form of a camera fade and there's at least a delay that's incorporated, I think that'll help reduce the potential risk of motion sickness. As far as the portal functionality itself, like that, I could see the application work. I'd see it be very enticing in VR. I think you just have to limit, or you have to be very cautious, I would say, with the verticality in your puzzle design.
Yeah, one thing that I did actually come across was that there's this article written by a bunch of I saw it fairly recently. It was a bunch of developers talking to this person on Game of Sutra or something like that about the principles of game design and VR design and production. And one of the production things they recommended was actually figured out by Google. I think Google Earth. If you speed up the speed of an augmented reality or VR device, one thing you can do apparently is you just basically put black frames on the sides and on the top and actually turn it from VR to more of a 2D experience inside of the headset. So as you start increasing in velocity, you just lower their field of view and put the black bars, because part of the whole reason why they're getting sick, having to jump through all of these all of these crazy turns, is because they're in a 360 seamless view, so there's nothing to orient them to the ground. So they get really confused. But if there's like a black frame around what they're seeing, it's not an ideal solution, but it seems like that has been one of the solutions to this problem. You could technically just make the character go like at the speed of light if you do that.
I would we implemented that last semester, just like vignettes based on speed. The problem being that while it does help, it doesn't help enough for something to be shippable a lot of the time.
Oh,
Google
really?
Earth VR has nice gentle movements with acceleration that doesn't change. Constant is the word I'm looking for. It's not good enough to just add a vignette and hope for the best, in my opinion, as we were able to prove out last semester. There are a lot of other tricks you can do, like adding a nose, adding anything to the face. I think if we threw a normal user in here who doesn't have the VR legs we have, VR legs being the kind of like sea legs, somebody can handle themselves on the sea. I don't
Essentially,
think
what
it
you're
would be
saying
good.
is they're used to VR, so a lot of
Yes,
things that would make a new user motion sick will not make this certain person with good VR legs motion sick.
absolutely. Which
No,
goes back to why you shouldn't test your own. Well, I mean, you test your own stuff, but you don't user test your own stuff.
which actually it's interesting you said adding a nose or something similar. That actually draws back to an experience that Joe, Xavier, and I worked on last semester, which you were the professor on, Ana, where we created a VR diving experience. And in order to combat motion sickness with our swimming mechanic, we added a helmet which encompassed the user's face and then placed a piece of the respirator directly in front of their nose. So they had something to kind of ground themselves on, and that greatly helped us reduce our motion sickness issue, which we had previously.
So I would like to add about this whole motion sickness issue that Valve has a VR experience, one of the most popular ones, I would suppose, right? The labs. The lab, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they made a Portal minigame, and they didn't include portals. So it just leads me to think that there's no way they didn't try it, right? If they had the technology and that's what their games, their IP is based on, if Valve couldn't pull it off, there's like a message there for the rest of us.
Basically, if Valve couldn't do it, you can't.
Well,
You can certainly try. But I mean, like, I don't want to discourage people from trying, of course.
I mean, I would say Anna kind of makes like actually a really good point about that. Like one of the biggest things that I would say is that people don't realize this, but at a certain point, you just need to tell. Like I said, if you figure out your audience, there are games that used to be geared when I was younger, and I'm sure you could play them now because a lot of people will be taken aback by how fast the movement speed is in Doom, and then absolutely appalled by how fast the movement speed is in games like Unreal Tournament and Quake. You're literally running at about 90 miles per hour. I think there's like some metrics that you're running basically at the speed of a race car around the game, and most people can't handle it or tolerate it, and at all. And in fact, even nowadays, one of the reasons why I believe there's a lot of third-person games is that by having it be third person, you can stick with a smoother camera, and therefore you actually reduce motion sickness. So I don't really necessarily, I've never really believed it to be 100% exclusive to VR. It's actually a problem with just first person games in general. That's why stuff like Moss VR, I never heard anybody getting sick playing that, or Astrobot, but something like Half-Life Alyx is going to cause more problems, even when you're just jumping the little tiny jump they add to the game that's very, very slow, that like you're floating. That's about the most I think people can put up with it. So it may be one of those things where it's a problem that you just can't solve, and you just basically either work with that audience, the people that can deal with it, or you just design something that necessarily doesn't really take full advantage of the of VR, at least when you're trying to do something where your character's moving really, really fast, or you intend to make a game that movement is intended to be really, really fast.
That's actually a really great observation. Thank you guys both. I never really thought about it like that. Of course, I thought to myself, oh man, it'd be so cool to play Portal in VR. But when you said, well, if Valve's probably tried it, and if, if they haven't done it, that's a lesson for you because
They
they're
spent
Valve.
7 years on it.
Yeah.
On Half-Life
Again,
Alyx.
I don't want to discourage anybody. Could
Of
you do
course.
portals in VR? Absolutely, I've seen it done. Could you do these exact portals in VR? Yes, but
Probably-
it would probably hurt.
Probably okay. Could you do it successfully? Is the question.
Yeah,
Probably not. But
not these
you know,
exact ones.
I do have a question about VR in general, which I think is perfect for both you and David to answer, Anna. And that is on Twitch. We got a question that says, VR has recently been used in a lot of animation, and we've seen that, and specifically like for its sculpting capabilities as well as its cinematic capabilities. And of course, we've seen it used in medical research at Ringling because we've used it, for projects like Moffitt and such. But do you think that VR is more successful as a tool, or do you think it will be more successful for leisurely use? Or honestly, like that could extend to both. But I'm just curious as to what you both think it'll be most likely used for in the future.
So I think right now VR has been more successful for serious usages, right? As a tool, as you would describe it, because it's not friendly for the consumer to buy, right? If you had to get a 300, or actually it's 300 is what it's now. Imagine back when you had to get how much was a Vive 5 years ago?
I paid 800, and if you include the
800.
add-ons, if you include all the add-ons that I've included, probably $2,100 at this point.
Yeah.
And then you had
then
the
have the
$1,800 computer minimum that you needed to
Yeah.
run it.
2,900.
Then you buy it, right? The setup takes forever. It's really painful. You had to put up the lighthouses. And then there's only like 20 good games. And they're all short. Right? That's not very conducive for a big consumer market. However, now with the Quest 2, as we've been seeing, little by little VR is getting lighter, easier to use, easier to set up, more cheaper in general. I think it's going to take a turn in the future where it's going to be either balanced out or become very popular for entertainment.
And also too a big element of that is that, I mean, even right now, I was like looking at sales for it. The actual Xbox is selling less than the Quest 2. Currently, the Quest 2 is actually significantly ahead. So now it's the third top selling console. And I believe this year, I was like trying to look at, I can't get the exact numbers off of a website, but looking at like it shooting up to the number of VR users went from 1 million to 3 million now. And on top of this, usage of all the other headsets have either been completely flat, or they have like gone down, especially for not like non-Vive, non-Vive or non-index. That it's literally seems like it's like 95% of the sales in the consumer market. It's literally crushing the entire market at this point. So I knew it would, because it's mobile. Like the biggest thing is that the wireless. Like I have the wireless Vive, and then like after I saw this, I was going like, oh, okay, and more so on top of that. I don't know what Facebook and Apple are thinking, but Apple owns ARM, and ARM has been almost exponentially increasing the power of their processors. Their cell phone processor is now more powerful than than like an Intel 11 something hundred. Like it's basically the most powerful processor in the world, and their next generation will probably be even stronger. So the ability for these headsets to actually play AAA games is possible. Like your cell phone will be able to play AAA games sooner rather than later. It's been the first time I think in 20 years there's been a massive quantum leap in technological power since I think the early 2000s to like the 90s. Because there was one every decade until we got to 2000s, and mostly it's just been Intel just sitting on their hands and holding patents and trying to keep a monopoly on the whole market. Because yeah, ARM is now crushing like both Ryzen as well as Intel.
Absolutely.
I think Xavier might be a little stuck. So Xavier, I want you to look ahead of you towards the exit. towards the exit. Now look up. Shoot your orange portal there, but make sure you move out of where you are before you get shot to death. Okay, shoot your. Yep.
But
All right, now that should stop you. Go ahead, guys. Sorry about that.
I think the other thing too is, at least for entertainment, I think the thing that people are not necessarily realizing is, I've always viewed this as kind of like, in the entertainment sphere, like making it a mobile device is more important than anything. Like cell phones are the most important thing, and trying to make it as social as possible. People wonder why Dead Space 3 was a multiplayer co-op game. It's because the social aspect is a huge selling point, especially back then and now. So realistically, that's why I think Rec Room is now like the top selling game on the entire like VR game that there is right now.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah, Rec Room, and VR chat has been like kind of, I don't know about that, but I know that Rec Room, especially with younger people, is like doing incredibly well. They're up to like multiple millions of users. They're cross-platform. They can run on VR, and so yeah, I feel like people think it's all going to be Half-Life Alyx, and I feel like all the successful stuff is going to be more akin to what you see on the Switch. Or
Yeah.
mobile.
Which is actually, it leads us to a really interesting question from Ghost Productions. Hey Ghost, I worked at this company when I was an intern last summer, so it's really nice to see them watching my stream. But they asked, do you guys think that VR will eventually become as common as immersive experiences on iPhones, and like as popular as iPhones are for viewing content online? Do you think that the Quest platform or any other platform could become as popular as iPhones are? And what I mean by that is, everyone kind of either has an iPhone or a smartphone of some sort that they use?
He's talking about sort of omniprescience of iPhones. Like there's literally, I think, multiple billions of phones at this point in the hands of consumers. So
and not just, people don't just own them, they're addicted to them. They use them all the time for everything.
Yeah,
I honestly don't think VR will get there because the iPhone is such a huge comparison. But could AR get there? I think so. Because AR is less obstructive. You don't have to cut yourself off from society for 5 minutes to check the weather, if you choose AR.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's probably the biggest thing, because everybody's holding their breath right now. Like chances are, even from what I've been seeing, it's just like AR is what every company is banking on, and VR is kind of like the stepping stone. And chances are it'll probably be both. Like I've always strongly believed that the only way forward for VR for mass adoption is that it has to be like a both type of thing. It has to get small enough that it's, I don't know if it's like an add-on. I don't know how people would approach it, but essentially that, both of these ecosystems like have to sort of combine. Because I can like literally walk around the Quest 2. I did it for like 5 hours without taking the thing off, like out in the middle of the street. And its cameras, even though there's no cameras up from it, it's like a clear enough quality that I could still read my computer with like the IR camera and do work. So
Don just said, how about an AR VR hybrid? We call that mixed reality. MR.
Yeah.
I was actually so confused by that question. I thought to myself, is that a thing? But can you define mixed reality for me?
David, you want to go, or
mixed or extended, I guess.
I've heard XR before. Extended.
XR, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
XR, I always use like XR as just kind of like the general, like, hey, we are an XR.
So when we talk about, just because I'm a little slightly bit confused, when we talk about XR, are we talking about something more similar to the Magic Leap, where we have games that you play within your house, but there's virtual spaces to it?
No, augmented.
Oh, that's AR. Okay.
Well, okay, so that's augmented reality. But for example, I know people that work at Microsoft, and they will hate you if you call the HoloLens AR, even though it is. They want it to be called MR.
Mixed reality. Okay.
Yeah. The Quest actually could count as MR because it has the full camera see-through mode, and you could theoretically
the pass-through mode.
Yeah, you could theoretically throw something in there, right?
That'd be cool. Yeah. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, maybe.
You guys use pass-through?
It's headed in the right way
on your Quest?
I don't. Well, just to set up my room scale.
I use it all the time, especially since they added the double tap on the right side of the Oculus Quest, so you can turn it off and on whenever you want.
Yeah, like that's a huge element. Is that's exactly what I'm talking about? Is that like I don't see what the difference is. You could basically run both types of apps on the hardware. If you just have a camera or get a high enough quality camera, you could come or IR camera or something like that. You pretty much could make AR games if the hardware would allow you to, like pretty easily.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That would
Just
probably
give
be
your
a great
quick slam
hybrid.
on it.
Yeah. If you could have like a pair of glasses that did AR normally, that integrated well into your personal life so that you didn't have to rely so much on the phone. And it had like a special mode where it went into VR mode where you got to block off everything around you. That could be good.
Yeah, but that's a huge element here is that VR, because of the fact that the experiences are kind of so tiring, I kind of view it in sort of the same realm as the Wii right now. But like when you look at mobile, yeah, it's the fact that you can the frequency use of mobile is even beyond, I think, PCs at this point. People literally work in front of their PCs. Like it's a level of addiction that has kind of that has like even just made AR mobile like pretty much a self-sustaining industry as of last year, especially during the whole COVID lockdown.
I saw a lot more from VR companies and VR media during the lockdown than I ever had in the 2 years prior. Trying to think, the Quest came out the summer before the lockdown, right? And then a little bit later into our year-long lockdown, we had the Quest 2 come out, and that's when I saw people that had never even talked to me about VR buying Quests. Which was funny because I had my cousin who is a little bit around my age who had never really shown an interest in VR, buying himself a Quest, and I saw more and more people that because before the people I knew that owned headsets were developers, like they're the ones who own the headsets, and then after that I started to meet more people who bought them specifically just for recreation, which was really exciting because it was an early stage in my career. But now it's kind of normalized, and something I see a lot is people buying a Quest and then getting super excited when it comes, and you can see that on the Oculus Quest subreddit if you guys ever frequent that space. But it's really interesting to see people using it specifically for recreation and the content that's offered on the headset instead of for development, which is what I had seen in the 2 years prior when I first started going to school at Ringling.
Yeah, for sure. There's been a big shift in our industry.
But
honestly, I've been working in VR for like a while before I actually started believing in it. I was like, oh, this is not going anywhere right now. Like a total waste of your investments. But as soon as the first Quest came out, I was like, yeah, okay, now we're talking. Now we're
so you were
cooking with fire.
It's here. Xavier, walk onto the catwalk and then shoot that portal.
Did anyone else see that? I got absolutely thrown off of that platform.
But yeah, I mean that's in large part. I think it's just the problem is that there's like this perception that people have is that VR I find it to be very difficult to believe that like almost anything will ever completely replace anything else. And I remember that even too. I remember when I can't remember. It was like one of the CEOs of either Zynga, I think it was the Rovio people, but like yeah, he just basically said that there was some a-hole comment he made where he said like basically in 5 years you'll all be working for me, implying that AAA is gonna die, and everybody just was like, what? and and that's how I mean. It's like that's how I kind of feel when I see people are like extreme enthusiasts or super defensive about it. It's like, I mean, the thing is that there's gonna be a market, and plus the hardware to even produce this stuff is like 3D TV didn't add anything, but at least I could see now, especially if you make it mobile, like that adds something that keeps it self-sustaining. Now, if somebody comes out with an AR helmet that literally can do both AR and VR, then yeah, the Quest and every VR headset's now obsolete. But that's just because it's doing the same thing but better and more things at the same time, not because it has no place.
That would be great, though.
Yeah, attach my phone to my face and not have it look like garbage.
Oh, it would look very unfashionable, probably. Well, at least for my style.
I love that you guys bring up unfashionable because that gets me to throw into the next question, which kind of extends more to the AR thing we were talking about earlier. Someone commented on Twitch. They said, "What about like Google Glasses? Could that be implemented with AR/VR for daily use?" And if anyone remembers Google Glass, it was unbelievably ugly.
It was so ugly. Yeah. So Google Glass did not have AR. I never tried one.
I thought that it was AR because it projected. I might be confused on my definition of AR here, but I thought that, as far as I was concerned, since I've actually never worked in AR, it was extending something from a digital space onto a real world space. So the Google Glass was an AR headset because it could extend
Yeah.
things in front of you, like it could put a map in front of you, or
Nice.
I'm trying to think what else. What else did the Google Glass do? I
It
never owned
recorded
one.
video.
I remember hearing a lot about it, and people were memeing on it because it was so ugly.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
hideous.
Like the
It looked like a
running
medical thing or something. Like it was not fashionable.
Xavier, plant the block directly above the button on the light so that it blocks the laser. So get up onto the catwalk and then make sure that the block is planted up, because you have to get onto the platform at the exit and then shoot that portal to make it drop.
I'm sorry, could you
Can I repeat my game? Okay, so
No.
you're in a.
That's all
So
you
you
needed.
see how it's blocking the laser
Oh,
right
no,
now?
no, that's all you needed to say. I did not see, because I had grabbed it so early into the puzzle, I didn't know that's what the laser did. I had completely
Yeah,
forgotten
so
that.
you need to make it so it's blocking the laser above the button, though, not where it is currently.
Yeah, I just have
Do
to
you know
create
how to do that?
Yeah, I just have to create a platform. Hold on. Let's see, where can I do that?
Right there.
That's pretty good.
You got it. All right, cool. Sorry, I hate to have to interrupt to help him out, but I don't want to be stuck on one section for too long,
All right.
just in case
I-
something else could come up. But
I was actually gonna throw in one thing because we went on like a huge tangent about like does Portal 2 work as either or, and I feel like one of the things that has been figured out by a lot of developers at this point is that it's a really bad idea to make your game exclusive to any platform. So the thing is that I feel like this game, if you take out the jumping problems, I can't think of any mechanics in the game that don't actually work in VR. And I think that's the thing with most first-person games is that this could easily just be a multi-platform game, much the same way that Hitman 3 was released as multi-platform with VR. It
or
changes.
Phasmophobia.
Yeah, exactly. Like these games are some of the most successful games because of that. Rec Room can be played on PC, it can be played on phone, and it can be played in VR. Same thing with VR chat. So. If you come at from that perspective, then you basically maximize your audience. And plus, too, like there's very few, at least from what I've seen, like especially on certain genres, there's not a lot of things that like I could if you converted Half-Life Alyx over the first-person mode, it really would change the game. It probably wouldn't play as well, but I could easily do it. I could easily go through that game, no problem.
I think that a Portal game in the same, production value of Half-Life Alyx would be awesome, and I would pay full price for it in a heartbeat because I absolutely loved Half-Life Alyx. Anna, did you play Half-Life Alyx?
I did, yeah.
Were you a fan of it? Am I fanboying too much when I say it's good?
No, I was a fan of it, mostly because of what it did to the medium, right? It really pushed it. As far as aesthetics, I'd say mostly, but it was also a big turning point, right? It was like a huge, huge IP coming to VR. VR basically exclusively, right? It was exclusive to VR, which made a lot of people angry. It was a big deal for our
I
industry.
remember hearing about that. All those poor Half-Life fans who had waited years for Half-Life 3.
Like,
and
what,
then
10 years more?
Yeah, and I mean it's never gonna come. They don't do third games, sadly. Actually, I think David, you put it perfectly when you said, Valve doesn't produce a new game in their IP until a new piece of technology or an industry advances in a way where they can come out with something brand new, which is why Half-Life Alyx is a thing.
No. That's something that other people have said. I say that they don't release sequels to their games because of the fact that they just have a lot of internal problems with development. And plus, too, they won't release something that's terrible, but then certain games they won't cancel either. They've canceled tons and tons of games that just didn't work out. But, I mean, they end up restarting development on Half-Life several times, apparently. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, I think that's a cover story. I think essentially, like, I mean, effectively, it's like, if that was the case, then why did they release Opposing Force, Decay, Blue Shift? Like, these are all Half-Life games. Why did they even like release Lost Coast? Why did they release episode 1 or 2? Like they didn't introduce anything like meaningful to the tech. So they were talking about using it as like a way of showing new engine stuff at the time, but I think that explanation has evolved over the years. So I mean, I'm just coming from somebody that grew up with them and listening to them. I mean, the thing it's just the thing is that they're not going to release a terrible game. They've only ever released Ricochet. That's the only bad Valve game that was technically a mod they purchased. You know, so and not under a financial pressure to release stuff like what happened with Cyberpunk 2077. So that's just like my perspective on it. It's that Valve was never gonna, and it took them a very long time because the Source engine was behind when they finally did sort of figure out the development of the game, and they were crunchy all the way to the end. Apparently, they rewrote the whole story several months out from the release, which it kind of shows. Nothing really goes forward in the story, but it does. I mean, it is certain. It does all tie together essentially. So it worked.
Well,
yeah.
thank you, David. We're just about out of time for this episode. So if there's any closing statements that our professional guests would like to leave us with, apologies. We did go down a lot of tangents, but that's kind of what I love to do on my podcast anyway. I like to just let people talk and focus on the guests more than I'm actually focusing on the game. But, you know, if there's anything you guys would like to say before we go offline, now would be the time to say it because we're almost over our time.
Anna?
Sorry to put you guys on the spot like that.
We didn't get to talk about Portal lots, but I recommend, like, honestly, it's kind of a gaming masterpiece as far as storytelling, in my opinion, and a little bit as far as mechanics, in my opinion, as well. And it's worth studying if you're going into game developments or even VR developments. Storytelling in general.
I would say, yeah, it's a good. I would say personally, it's a good idea for both. I mean, I study a lot of VR games. You know, I think my Steam library's like got 500 games in it at this point of just random stuff I've downloaded. And then, of course, I study a lot of traditional games as well to try and just get new ideas and understand how people put video games together from a consumer view. So, you know, I think. Just one more thought, and then I'll let you go, David. I think just one thing that a good developer does is, you know, any good filmmaker has watched probably 1,000 films, and any good game designer has probably played, you know, 1,000 games, right?
Mm-hmm.
is my personal ethos. But go ahead, David.
Oh no, I was just pretty much. I was gonna agree with that, and then just also at the same time, yeah, this series is really stuck out to me. Because I had played every AAA game up to this point. This is the only game that I could say is actually ageless. Like even more than Doom or anything like that. These two games, the very first Portal game especially, was one where it was just like I could say like, yeah, 25 years to the future. That game came out kind of at the same time as Team Fortress 2. Will never look bad. It will never like the story is great. It actually does. It's one of the only comedy games that's actually funny. Like, yeah, this is one, and the first Portal game was like one of the first games ever, from what I understand, to ever be studied at the college level for environmental storytelling. Like, it was one of the first actual college courses on gaming, just in general, in like sort of a literary context and a production context. So, yeah, it's not Citizen Kane, but it's pretty important, I feel. So.
Well, I think that's a perfect analogy of it. But you know, with that, I think we'll wrap it up. I'd like to thank both you, David and Ana, for being on the show tonight. It means a lot that you guys took the time out of your Friday nights when you could have been doing a lot more cool stuff than talking to students on their podcast. So I really appreciate you guys both being on the stream. Ana, I'd also like to thank you for sharing the link to this podcast on your Discord because we had more watchers than we ever had on the show. So you did me a huge favor. Everyone who came from Ana's Discord, welcome. This show happens every week, so if you enjoyed this episode, you know, feel free to tune in same time next week for whichever game we choose. Then we haven't actually picked the game for next week, but I will say Ana, I would love it if you would come back on the show sometime in the future. I really appreciated your insight when it came to talking about VR games and just the industry in general. David, of course, I always appreciate your insight as well, and I'm really looking forward to you coming on for Hitman 2 in a few weeks. So, with that, again, thanks also to my co-hosts Joe and Xavier for helping me monitor the chats and making sure that everything's tip top there. And I think, with that, we're good to go. Unless am I forgetting anything, Joe and Xavier?
I can't think of anything at the moment.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So
Well-
with that, we will end the stream. Thank you everyone for watching, and for everyone who wants to come back, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for having us.
Oh yes,
We
thank
appreciate it.
So sorry. I'm new. I'm new to this, but
You're good.
yes. Xavier, you can.
Don't worry.